Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I am delighted to introduce our next guest on the Data Driven Leaders series. I am joined by Glenn Goldman, who is a director of product management at Digital Turbine and one of Rill's most active users of our product. Glenn, welcome to Data Driven Leaders.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Glenn, I always like to start by just asking folks a little bit more before we get into kind of your journey at Digital Turbine and a little bit of what got you into media in the first place. I thought we would just start by talking about Digital Turbine. Its business, the types of advertisers you work with, the platform, and then we can talk a little bit about your remit inside the publicly traded Digital Turbine empire.
Yeah. I'm happy to give a little bit of an overview of the company for folks that don't know Digital Turbine. So we work with a variety of mobile players, basically anybody in the mobile ecosystem, from the telecommunications companies, the mobile carriers like Verizon, to the folks that are making handsets, OEMs, hardware manufacturers like Samsung and Motorola, to the folks that are making apps themselves, the app developers, agencies, and brands. So basically, anybody who wants access to the mobile ecosystem, we work with them. And what we do is we connect them directly to the device end user. That is our remit. Is our goal in life is to bring everybody immediacy and access to devices and to end users. And we do that through a number of different solutions at the entire life cycle, growth life cycle is what I would call it. So I would start with the user acquisition side.
Yep.
And on the UA side, we have our own way of connecting users through in-app advertising using really compelling technology, proprietary technology that we call single tap, which allows folks to access and to interact with users without having to go through the traditional storefronts. And so we do direct delivery of mobile applications to users, bypassing those kind of chaotic and noisy storefronts where people often get sucked into what Google or Apple want them to do. We engage users with really compelling creative video, playables, etc. We engage people with native tools on the device itself, like stock notifications, where we can provide compelling promotional content, both for brands and for mobile advertisers. And then on the monetization side, through our brand safe SDK, where we can allow app developers to monetize their programmatic supply. And so really, if you're in the mobile space, we're working with you. We're looking to either get you access to customers or to help you monetize.
And I know before you've been at Digital Turbine almost a decade. I think you've got your 10-year milestone coming up, which I think we all sometimes find it hard to believe that we've been anywhere for for a full decade. But I know that you were in the music business before joining Digital Turbine. Maybe just share a little bit for our audience about how you went from someone who had studied music and music production. Like all musicians are once a musician, always a musician. Tell us a bit about your journey and how you came to be leading a product management team at Digital Turbine.
Sure. Yeah. Love to get into it. I mean, I would say that my journey's always been about connecting the creative and technology. That's really where I've always lived, is between those two spaces. So born and bred a musician, play a number of different instruments. And I just have always had a love of kind of all the different styles of music. And I really wanted to be a part of that for a long time. So whether it was playing music or curating musical experiences for people, where I was a DJ for many years, both in college and then out in California, And then starting to work through how I can activate that and monetize that in a way that it was scalable. Because as most people know, DJing house parties is not a career, um, although it is a favorite pastime of mine. Um, so really, what I started to do was to find ways to take that love of the creative process and to scale it out for other people. And so I started working in the music industry out in California and San Francisco in the digital music distribution space and the
Hmm.
marketing space. And this is right around the time where social media was starting to take off. And so it offered a new channel for us to work with independent artists, labels, to help them promote their content on these really organic channels that were just coming up, right? So this was before sponsored paid ads, and we were doing a lot of growth hacking and trying to get into that space.
MySpace a part of that at that point?
Oh yeah, absolutely. MySpace was, I would say, I actually have a MySpace music hoodie that I almost wore today. I was deciding between the professional and the music ethos or persona. I hope I made the right choice.
Yes.
Uh,
I
but
have a collar on. We're good. We collaborate, but we this is not, pre-planned. We both jointly chose this.
might as well be twins today. Yeah, so it was an interesting time, it was an interesting space, but one of the things that I loved about being in San Francisco at the time was getting access to technology in a way that was going to accelerate music's growth. And
Mhm.
so we all know that with iTunes and digital distribution, things were starting to explode, starting with Napster, of course, and then the tools that allowed people to pirate music, which wasn't my favorite part, but still being able to connect into those technologies for promotion and for distribution.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where I realized that there was this synergy between the creative process and the kind of technologist side
Mhm.
of things. And so I actually built my first product out there was a licensing platform that would allow content creators, whether they were artists or in some cases we were working with people that would do parody songs or even sound effects. We had
Wow.
all sorts of different um, indie labels that we worked with to monetize their content through a self-service licensing platform.
Hmm.
And if you're at all familiar with, like, you hear a song on a movie or in a game, and you're like, how did that song get there? Right? I wonder who did that. Well, typically it's a set of gatekeepers, like highly paid music supervisors, and they have access to the best music in the world, but they are coveted for their ear and for their access. And if you're an indie artist starting to come up, like you don't really have access to those music soups because it's a really high barrier of entry. You have to get all this validation to be able to break into that. And we wanted to cut that down, especially in San Francisco, where you had this burgeoning app developer space. You had people building all these games in basements or gaming studios starting to come out. And we just saw this need and this opportunity to connect, you know, hundreds of indie artists with tens of thousands, or I should say, indie labels with tens of thousands of different artists and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of songs to this new marketplace
Hmm.
of app developers and what have you. And so we had everything pre-cleared. We built out a platform. That's kind of where I learned about the marketing funnel and the checkout flows and how to tap into customer experience and all those other things. It was a really eye-opening experience for me. But the thing also to this conversation that I took away from it was really understanding the data behind the experience.
Mhm.
And I would say that that's the first opportunity that I had to really understand that every transaction is not a data point, it's a person.
Mhm.
And I've carried that with me throughout my career, especially as I've moved on to other companies, working with millions of artists and SaaS products, or now at Digital Turbine. It's really been critical for me to always evaluate the world in terms of people and what they're trying to do, and
Mhm.
not just the data point. Because when you lose sight of the user and the customer experience and their intents and their motives and their personas, you effectively just start to optimize to a number. And
Hmm.
and that's where, your KPIs go down and business goes down. So that was an important lesson for me.
And of course, in the world of data analytics, I think one of the numbers that everyone cares about in advertising is things like reach, right? And unique reach and incremental reach. And those things ultimately, um, we have so many proxies for people, but of course, many of these can be manipulated and sometimes, inaccurate, and so ultimately the goal is to reach people, not to reach devices, not to reach pages or sites. It's ultimately there's a person that we're trying to connect with in some way, and expose a new technology, new applications to. But I strongly agree it can get lost sometimes, right? We can sort of forget about the people in this process, and suddenly we're just looking at data points, not recognizing they're really, again, a means to an end, not an end in themselves. I
Absolutely.
I guess, maybe to sort of get drill down and get, very specific. Today, by the way, congratulations. I know recently you were promoted to director of product management at Digital Turbine. Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day role, and we'll talk a bit about some of the data tools that you're using in that role. But you maybe tell us a bit about a day in the life of Glenn when you wake up in the morning. What sort of data tools are you working with? What sort of analytics insights questions are you kind of asking in your day-to-day, kind of operational activities, with your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I'll give everybody a little bit of an understanding of my purview where I focus, and then we can talk a little bit about the day to day. I love the question. So I lead all of our data product initiatives, and what that essentially means is if it has to do with device and customer identity, attribution, if it has to do with experimentation, audience extrapolation, audience targeting, and audience optimization, all of those areas kind of fit into my world. And it's a really interesting space, especially at a company like Digital Turbine. Every company has to solve these problems, but one of the things that makes Digital Turbine unique is that we have really assembled key strategic pieces over the course of a number of years to build this platform, this network. And so we've acquired a number of companies, and it's become really important for us to find the right ways of connecting all of the data points to extract value through all of those channels.
Hmm.
And so it's a really tremendous opportunity for me, and something that I love and I'm honored to be a part of. Um, and so, day to day, interesting question. I mean, after my first or second pour over, because I'm a big coffee drinker in the morning, and that's how I kind of get things going. I wake up every morning thinking to myself, how can I connect a real person to an experience that's going to be valuable? And again, I go back to that because I think I mentioned earlier, Digital Turbine is this platform. We work with all these different players. We are part of the mobile ad ecosystem. And so a lot of people would go and look at that and say, well, you're just putting ads, you're putting apps on phones, you're putting ads into the ecosystem, right? But I think it's so much more than that, because you have to understand the intent behind what a person wants when they engage with a mobile application, right? And so the traditional way of thinking about it would be to say that when I go in and I'm playing Candy Crush or whatever the game may be, some match three game, that I'm going to go in there and maybe an ad will float by me and I will hate it, and then I will try and X out of it as quickly as possible. And our view of the world is that if you're in this space, what is the context you are in that can allow you to enrich your experience without detracting from your current experience? And that's one of the reasons why we built our single tap technology, right? When you engage with an ad within a mobile application and you click on that ad, if you happen to find it interesting, you're off to the Google Play Store, where you're overwhelmed with all of these other recommendations and things that take you out of that experience.
Hmm.
But with single tap, We allow a user to stay in their context, to continue to engage with that game and deliver the application in the background. And then we provide a helpful notification that sits in their tray so that they can come back and activate that game when they're ready to.
Mhm.
And that's part of the thinking that goes into all the products that we develop and the experiences that we develop. So I think that's a really important part of how I view the world.
How how do you when you sort of evaluate the efficacy and the performance, the single tap sounds like, a big differentiator for Digital Turbine. When you're looking at um, I think a lot of folks in the world of digital advertising, I think of it as this, always on sort of global digital nervous system with, signals, flying everywhere. And, it's sort of truly the world never sleeps. I'm sure when you wake up in the morning, there's always been, hours and hours of activity that you're going to kind of look and see, how is the platform performing? How are our partners doing? What are some of the metrics that you look at to evaluate? And maybe, we can talk broadly and then even specifically with like single tap. What are some of those metrics that you look to as signs that things are going well or warnings that maybe something needs to be adjusted? Maybe give us a sense of like how do you evaluate in a data-driven way the success and monitor the performance of the
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah. Great question. So, I mean, probably similar to many other product managers, I always break down my success metrics into three layers. So,
Hmm.
I've got my business success metrics, my product success metrics, and my observability success metrics, right? And I have to make sure that I'm looking at all three of those at different layers, and we use different tools to look at all those different ones. So on the business side, it's probably a couple of the more traditional metrics. Like we, of course, are looking at things like gross revenue and interactions and the revenue that we can generate per user. But for me, more important is actually going back to what I mentioned earlier, those user experience and user engagement metrics.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, what we need to do is ensure that when people interact with the experiences, that they walk away with a positive experience, not a negative experience. Otherwise, they're not going to come back. And
Hmm.
what do I mean by comeback, right? They're ads. What do you mean by comeback? Well, at the end of the day, we know that we have a massive footprint and an opportunity to engage with customers in lots of different areas. Yes, it's in app, but it's also through these native experiences on their device, whether it's through those notifications or what we call our beachfront property, which is our alternative storefronts or our
Hmm.
content media applications. So all of these different opportunities are areas for us to demonstrate value. And so, yeah, we look at monthly active users, which is a more traditional MAUs, DAUs, and WOWs. We look at those metrics because we want to ensure that when people engage, they're coming back and that they have a positive experience. We look at the traditional funnel metrics, like the number of people that start in those ads that ultimately click through, and like your ad tech KPIs of impressions down to clicks, down to installs. And then I would also say that a big part of what we care about is making sure that there's recurring retention and engagement for our advertisers. So
Hmm.
we always want to speak the language of our mobile advertisers, and what they care about at the end of the day is that customers are engaging with their products on a recurring basis,
Hmm.
right? LTV, ROAS, retention.
Hmm.
And so those any of our customers' metrics are our metrics.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then lastly, I would say the third layer of that is those observability metrics where we're looking at like API response time and throughput, and just to make sure that we have a really healthy system that's able to keep up with all the demand and the traffic that we're running.
Hmm.
Um, and so we have lots of different tools that we use at different layers of that. Obviously, Rill is an important part of this on our business metrics and our product health metrics, especially on our product health metrics, where we have access to really an unlimited number of measures and dimensions that give us that kind of slice and dice capability.
what are maybe we definitely drill into you know how Digital Turbine has been using Rill. Maybe before we do that, I'd love to hear what are some of the other tools that you use across this. You talked about this trifecta of business, product, and observability metrics. Just for folks who are listening, what we'll put Rel in the sandbox for a moment and say, what are some other great data tools that you find to be valuable as you look at these different kinds of metrics for both internal and customer facing?
Sure. Before I talk about tools, I always want to talk about framework because
Hmm.
for me, the tools are a means to an end.
Yep.
Um, but what matters is how we think about the problem. And when we started to frame up how we wanted our data platform to work, I wanted to ensure that we had a consistent way of communicating that to everybody in the organization. So we came up with a framework, which I call the CAMA framework.
Hmm.
Uh, I may have put Culture Club on repeat while I was DJing today as well. So that, that was definitely in the back of my head. Although it is spelled a little bit differently here. It's CAMA, comma, and it stands for collect, aggregate, model, and then, of course, action,
Mm.
right? And actually, in deciding on this framework, I was really inspired by something I read. Um, I think it might have been a Gladwell book, if I'm not mistaken, but it was a US Air Force pilot named John Boyd.
Hmm.
Are you familiar?
The OODA loop.
You know it, the OODA
Yes.
loop, right? And the OODA loop is, do you remember what it stands for?
Uh, is it observe, orient, decide, and act?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so the context for folks that may not know about the OODA loop is, Boyd came in as a tactician. He was this celebrated fighter pilot, and they wanted to extract his experience and his learnings to these fleets of newcomers. And what he was able to do is to break down why he was successful into a way that was tangible and practical for people, which was to understand that every decision he made didn't come out of nowhere. It was a series of steps done in almost milliseconds
Hmm.
that led to the next good decision. And so that, as you said, observe, orient, decide, act. And it was kind of a way to think about and process how to make complex decisions in a short amount of time.
Hmm.
And for me, that really became an anchor of what I wanted to do as well, because it wasn't so much about the immediacy, but it was about the loop,
Hmm.
right? Of every piece of data that we collect, every interaction that a customer has with our platform should provide value into the next interaction.
Hmm.
Right? It's the core tenet of advertising. And so for us, we have this different loop. It's called the comma loop. And it starts with collect, where we have access to billions of mobile devices around the world globally. And we do that through both our APK and our brand safe SDKs that are integrated into app developers' phones. And we capture data through those technologies into our data lake using all sorts of streaming technologies like Kafka and Spark to move data from point A to point B. Um, and we use at this next stage of the loop we have aggregate. And again, I mentioned earlier, when you are a massive company where you have these different assets that weren't necessarily built at the same time or by the same leadership group, we've acquired really some strategic parts. Being able to connect all those pipes in a way that was efficient, fast, and not duplicative, we needed to find the right technologies to do that. And that's where Databricks came in and really powered this kind of single pane of glass with what they call Unity Catalog. It's a wonderful tool, and it gives us a single queryable layer across all of our data sets, regardless of whether they're in Databricks or Google BigQuery or somewhere else, or Firebase. So very powerful. Um, and we use a medallion data architecture to then process raw silver, bronze, silver, gold, raw, and then enriched, and then our kind of aggregation tables. So then moving to the kind of the modeling side of things, that's where we have both some proprietary tools that we've built ourselves, and then also some that we license. So one of the proprietary tools that we built is something that we call DT Sage.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it's all about being able to get access to real-time data and to understand where those trends are moving, provide alerting around it. And so anomaly detection is so critical to our business, understanding data quality and where we're seeing things move around. Are these just the normal patterns of our business, a new device launching, or did something go wrong? So we built out tooling using our own kind of coding and some AI models like the Facebook profit model, and then integrating those into other tools like Slack and email so that we can give people direct access to things that are going on around the business that may be problematic, that they can be investigated. Interestingly, on the modeling side, one of the things that Rill's been great for is actually connecting to those alerts. And so when an alert is fired through Slack, we now can click on a Rill link, and it'll take you directly to the KPI that you need to investigate and allow you to deep dive that to understand why that may have gone wrong, which is already like, I think it's just immeasurable in terms of the value that we can get out of something like that. Also for modeling, we're big, heavy Vertex AI users on the Google side.
Wow.
And so they power a lot of our model registry and our feature registry, and where we do a lot of that work. And that really unified our data science team, which was incredibly important. And then on the ACT side, we've also started to incorporate some new technologies that are available to everybody. Again, on the Google suite, we're using Notebook LM to be able to take some of our own extrapolations of those data, whether they're documents or reports that we've built out, feed them into a system that allows us to then interact with it creatively, collaboratively, in order to advance any idea. And whether it's our internal manuals that we use for how to operationalize a specific thing, or just in terms of how we build a PRD, that's a really great tool for us as well. So lots of different tools in the space that help power our CAMA loop.
Where in that framework have you found the real analytics tool and business intelligence tool to fit in? If we think about again, collect, aggregate, model, action, maybe give us a sense of where you mentioned one example of firing alerts out of your Facebook profit, designed alerting system and sending alerts to Slack. Maybe give us a sense of what are some places where you found the real analytics tool to be valuable in that framework of CAMA?
Yeah, sure. So it's toward the tail end, which is probably the most important, well, I'd say one of the most important parts, right, of being able, or the bookend, I should say, of action. Rill for us was a way to empower people. If I look back a couple of years ago, I think that when DT looked at where we were in this space, we said, hey, we have the right strategy. We know we're in the right place. We have the right assets, right? What's going to differentiate? And we're there at the right time, by the way, whether it's with the changing regulatory landscape and how we can support mobile publishers and carriers with alternative storefronts to the traditional storefronts. As we all know, that's starting to change with the Epic Apple legislation and new legislation that's getting passed in Europe. So we have all these things, right? But the way we win isn't just strategy or product or timing. It's about the people in the company. It's about their ability to execute on the information that they have, to do their job better than others. And that is, you asked me like what do I think about when I wake up in the morning? Democratizing access to data
Hmm.
is one of the most important things for a company. As soon as you empower people with insights into what's going on for their role, relevant to their role, and allow them to shorten that OODA loop, going back
Hmm.
to that other example, that's where we can start to win because it's all about speed. And so that's where Rill came in. What Rill allows us to do is to answer the questions we haven't asked yet. And it does that by surfacing information in a way that is immediately digestible and actionable.
Thank you. I promise we won't hold this against you when our sales team is talking about these compliments will not be held against you in future.
Yeah.
The I guess that you were talking a little bit about the difference between in the old world and kind of in the new world, and tools that allow you to sort of build dashboards and allow you kind of to answer the questions you kind of already knew you wanted to ask, versus maybe answering questions you didn't know you had, right? I think we've all had that experience in data analysis of you know for better or for worse, behind every question, the answer to every question is often leads to another question, right? Um, and so, kind of that the speed of those question and answer loops, or those kind of iterative investigations, if it takes hours between each question and answer cycle, each OODA loop there, right, it really can be limiting to the ability, the agility of businesses to kind of move fast. Uh, maybe, how did, like, some people think of Rill as we call it a dashboard. It's an exploratory, interactive dashboard. But how do you, if someone a colleague were to come to you and say, "Hey, Glenn, I'm starting a new role at an e-commerce, platform. We're looking for tools that will help us, kind of make sense of some of our KPIs that are, constantly these operational KPIs that are always changing." How would you explain the difference between a tool like Rill and sort of traditional dashboard tools like Tableau and Looker and others of that nature? And I ask
Yeah.
that because candidly, I think we at Rill sometimes we ask ourselves, how should we describe this tool to folks who haven't used it before?
Yeah, I was going to say so first I will send you my address for the royalty checks.
You're in the
And then
you're from the music business. You know how these royalty checks work,
that's
right?
that's exactly right. And then I'll also send you my corporate address for the consulting fee that will apply on the sales side.
Right.
Uh, no, it's a good question. I think um, it goes back to a little bit of what I was describing earlier, which is the immediacy and access to data across a number of different dimensions and measures that allow you to really understand what's happening in your system.
Hmm.
And giving you this kind of holistic view of like I almost imagine being in a nuclear facility with all the buttons and levers, right? And you need to be able to see all of the buttons and levers to be able to know if something is off or something is wrong, or whether it's a or maybe this is like being in an airplane or something like that with all the controls and knobs. Even if your expectation is that there's three knobs that you're going to be looking at on a regular basis, like keep your hands on 10 and 2 and like right, there's like a couple things. But when something goes wrong, you need to be able to look across all of these other tools, right? Is this light on? Is that light supposed to be on at the same time as this other light?
Hmm.
For example, right? Seeing the comparison between two dimensions and how those are growing. And so for us, we use it both on kind of the day-to-day product health side, but then also on the insight side. And actually, this is a use case for Rail that I didn't even anticipate we would have, but quickly found out that it was driving a lot of value. So We wanted to be able to provide the rest of our organization with an understanding of audiences in a rich way. And we didn't want to go and build another dashboard, another tool to do it, right? A lot of people would immediately get to work in, Vue.js or whatever it was, like
Mm.
building their own front end and their web application. And I guess with Replit, maybe that would be faster now. But no, it was really about harnessing that kind of slice and dice, that immediacy, and that kind of holistic view of all your different dimensions together, being able to play with that at scale. Because what we're talking about is being able to see the overlap in audiences at a user level between the folks that are engaging on our ads products or on our exchange product or on our on-device products. Because as I mentioned earlier, unifying that data and modeling that data in order to really build insights through DTIQ is for us so important. And so one of the dashboards that we built is what we call our audience insights dashboard. And it allows us to view the growth of our audience across all of our different products, broken down by dimensions like geo and model and OS version, and whether we have certain signals on those users. We've captured those signals deterministically, or we've modeled those single signals. And so from that, we've been able to make so many product level decisions about where we should play and when we should play. This is a space where, hey, we're seeing growth in this area. We're seeing kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario by connecting these two different product experiences. We're able to outperform for device end users. If they're users of our on-device experiences and they're users of apps where our Exchange SDK is embedded, we can take those learnings and provide something really compelling for them that allows them to get ads that are really just more useful for them, right? Apps that are more useful for them. And so that has been incredibly important to us. And the reason why Rill was so important is because we actually tried to build this using Tableau. It wasn't performant.
Hmm.
You sit there and the page would load for a minute and a half.
And these are billion, you have billions. I mean, your audiences that you work with at Digital Turbine scale to the billions, right? So that's I'm sure one of the challenges you face. You mentioned that scale. Not certainly Digital Turbine is unique, not totally unique, but you are operating at a scale that is not something you can put in Excel or something like, you know, more maybe traditional tools.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, modeling the data and then accessing the data are two things that Rill has brought to the table, right? Being able to model it using the technologies that you do, like Druid and what have you, but then also to access the data. Both are equally important for us.
I know we're almost the top of the hour, and I so appreciate making the time to chat. One thing I want to sort of talk a little bit about is looking forward. We've talked a lot about the use cases, and the strategies, the frameworks that you use in your day-to-day work at Digital Turbine, leading the data initiatives on the product side. I I I was you know. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about AI, right? This is
Sure.
what's on top of mind for all of us. We know this is a great, the next great revolution that we're living through here. We talked, a few moments ago about the early days of social media and the emergence of the smartphones and the mobile web. Um, I was just wondering a little bit about how you're thinking about you know the future of data analytics at Digital Turbine. How, as you're looking at AI and you mentioned you're using Google's Vertex offering, how
Yeah.
are you how what do you see as some of these future use cases, and bringing AI powered tools into your day-to-day workflow? And I'll add one final piece, which is how do you think that we should be thinking about bringing some of these AI capabilities into a tool like Rill?
100%. Yeah. So AI is a funny word, a funny two letters, I would say. in that for those of us that were in ad tech for the last 10 years, we've been using machine learning techniques forever. And so what they used to call AI was just ML. Of course, it's now advanced beyond that.
It was called statistics, and then it was rebranded to machine learning, and now it's been rebranded to
That's right. Originally, it was an abacus. Let's be honest, right?
AI.
The journey, but so the tooling has gotten better and better and better. And if even if I step back from the data analytics side and take my data hat off and just think about it from a product perspective, we use it in so many different ways today to drive better decisioning, better business outcomes. Every PRD that we write goes through a process where it started originally actually with just using the native tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and Perplexity, but now we built our own AI tool, which is what we call PRD bot.
Hmm.
So this was built by one of our lead architects, and PRD bot takes some of the traditional mechanisms of natural language and chatbot interfacing, but then it also overlays these personas that actually influence the generation of the PRD. And this was kind of the unique aspect of it, right? Is building this agentic solution where you're not only getting what the model was trained on, but you're getting an influenced version of how you should think about creating a PRD by running it through the ops persona, by running it through the revenue leader persona, by running it. So like how would, our revenue leader, our chief revenue officer, look at this PRD? What questions would they ask to make sure that their concerns are being addressed? And so we created all these different personas to
Wow.
inform how you go about creating that PRD. Um, it's fun, first of all, but it's also saved just so much time in terms of the cycles of the back and forth you go through when you're in product. It's all about stakeholder conversations and discourse and management, and you have countless conversations where you're going to a stakeholder and walking them through what you're trying to build, and then they give you that feedback.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I didn't think about that. And now we've kind of captured those key questions in these personas to accelerate the cycle.
Wow.
So that's kind of one of the unique things that we're doing over at DT. And I mentioned Notebook LM, which we're heavy users of as well, and a lot of the different operations teams. Um, but when it comes to analytics, I think the most important thing is that not everybody wants to look at a dashboard. Not everybody wants to have to sit there and click, 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 click. Ultimately, people know what they're after, and,
Mhm.
and anything that gets in the way of getting to that answer often interrupts the entire creative process
Mhm.
of solving that problem, which is the beauty of chatbots and LLMs, right? It's like to be able to interface with something natively
Yeah.
and then work your way through it. And that's, I know, something that the Rill team has brought to life as well with a recent feature that you guys have produced, where you can kind of natively communicate with a chatbot to explore your data. And I think that is one of the key, let's call it, revolutions that we'll see now coming in the next couple of years.
Mhm.
There have been some evolutions, but when we think about revolution, which is like happening now, it's
Mhm.
about being able to communicate natively with something that allows you to explore your data in such a way that really shortens that feedback loop.
Mhm.
I'm curious to see like what my children will be doing, well, whether they'll even be able to type on a keyboard by the time they're 15. Um,
I'll just speak to the avatar, the analytics avatar, like Max Headroom, but an actual useful version, right?
that's
Um, I mean, I guess I'll add one more layer as a final thought for prompt, for you to comment on, which is when you talked about this, the last, the last word in both the CAMA framework and in the OODA loop framework is action. And I think that one One area that certainly holds promise is that for so many analytics tools, we have sensors, right? We have insights, but everyone always talks about ultimately an insight without action is, it's not very valuable. Companies have to act on what they perceive, right? And so, in that example you gave, when you observed that, there was a reason why something was not working with that new, launch, you had to take action on it and correct it. And so, I guess it seems like there's an opportunity for interfaces, and let's give the example of the world of advertising platforms, where if you want to change something like a bid floor, or you want to change a targeting parameter, is there an opportunity for those actions to also be mediated through a natural language interface? And how is Digital Turbine thinking about that today? Where again, you talked about analytics. Not everyone wants to click through dashboards. They just want to ask, why is revenue down for this advertiser in the last 6 hours, and get an insight. But if they want to take action on that, how might you think about that possibility in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're already seeing it. We've been seeing it when it comes to customer support agents and all these other things that allow you to simplify the process of getting to where you're trying to go. I remember just yesterday I was trying to debug my internet service.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to talk to a person, but I was willing to put up with the chatbot to see how close it got. And the truth is, it got me there in about 45 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
because I was able to ask a couple, standard questions, and it pointed me exactly to where I needed to go, and I was off to the races. And that was something that 2 years ago, maybe even 1 year ago, I would not have put up with, because the technology wasn't good enough to be able to actually interpret from what you were saying the correct, appropriate action to take.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're already seeing that quite a bit. Now, on the ad tech side, I think audience targeting is changing very quickly. The old world of being able to select a group of people based on the fact that their IAB classifies them as sports lovers or casual gamers. I think what we're quickly realizing is there's such a deeper, more expressive way for us to kind of capture those insights and find those people than what we've been using historically. And so we're actually moving away from your traditional click button content management system audience targeting to more, like we were talking about, natural language expression. And you can imagine a world where when a agency comes to you as an ad platform, they're not walking through here's my IO, here's my brief, right, describing my target audience. If this is McDonald's, for instance, and they're saying, we're really after is people in the Midwest, 35 to 44, who are hamburger lovers, right? But that's kind of a very simplistic view of the world. So now we can take that, we can plug that in directly as an input into our audience building service. And we can use our ability to extrapolate LLMs have completely changed the game. We can use our ability to extrapolate from all of the interactions that we have on the platform, with the apps that we have, with content, because we have really rich content that people can engage with through our Moment app, as individual signals, individual nodes that describe their experience, and connect that in a really compelling way. The access to this technology has just accelerated the ability for companies like Digital Turbine to drive performance for advertisers, to drive those really compelling experiences for customers, without having to go through the rigmarole of clicking buttons and making decisions. And as everybody knows, it's all driven through modeling techniques that are kind of doing what I would call automated audience discovery and automated audience optimization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we firmly believe that in our data exists an advertiser's target audience,
Hmm.
and that we want to know how they think about their audience, but that we have a deeper insight into our audience that we can provide on our platform.
Right. It certainly feels that that in terms of people are we're somewhat non-determined. These deterministic paths we've historically used to define audiences are kind of overly rigid, right? We've all seen that where we say, I want to construct an audience, and you end up finding three people that match this kind of overly rigid definition of soccer mom who's an auto intender that lives in Rochester, that you have three people. And certainly the ability for large language models to kind of understand that maybe soccer and football are synonyms, and not everyone uses the word mom. It might be you could define a mom as even though it may not be out there, that someone who's buying diapers and baby formula is very likely to be a mom, even though it's never been labeled that way. That sort of fuzzy logic that large language models are really, really good at. It feels like a resonant match for what you just described as creating audiences, and Digital Turbine has an extraordinary amount of signal to help inform kind of inform that. Glenn, I'm going to end on that's a great place to end, is reminding our audience that you've got some really differentiating offerings here that are been launched recently, are coming down the pipe. Thank you so much for taking time out on your Friday to speak with us and share some of your wisdom, your learnings, your experiences. We look forward to the next conversation. And again, thanks for making time to talk with all of us.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This has been a pleasure. It's been a real treat for me too. I really enjoyed the conversation. Again, I'll give you the address for the royalty checks later, but no, this is great. I love what you guys are doing here, which is really bringing just conversation to life, and so that people understand all the different ways that data and that technology, and then I can go back to it, creativity can come together and to make things that are valuable for people.